Hey guys, welcome to Vony Movies Recap. Today, I will show you a drama, horror from 2017, titled, Berlin Syndrome. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Before we start, please, subscribe, and leave a like, to help the channel. The movie begins with Claire arriving in Berlin, Germany, as a young female tourist. She walks to her accommodation, a hostel with group bunking rooms, and spends the evening partying with some people, possibly also tourists, on the rooftop. She takes photos of the sunrise and in the morning dresses and takes her backpack with her out sightseeing. She purchases some clothes, photo slides, and takes photos within the street, one among a girl airing a colorful sheet out an apartment window. She visits a bookshop and takes interest in a very book of artworks. Leaving the shop, she follows out a person and that they meet on the footpath waiting at a collection of traffic lights. He drops his belongings and Claire assists him, after which a conversation sparks where he casually asks why she's traveling alone and offers her some strawberries. Claire goes with this man, Andy, to determine the general public garden where the strawberries grow. They talk and get to grasp one another, Andy mentioning it is a good place to complicate life. Claire corrects him, contemplate life. Claire ignores a call from her mother. He drives her back to her accommodation where they nearly kiss. She invites him up for a drink at the bar and he declines. The subsequent day Claire ventures out sightseeing again and searching for Andy, who she finds within the same bookshop staring at the book of artworks. They spend the day together. He drives them back to his place, which is extremely quiet and desolate. His upstairs apartment is tucked away behind a locked building foyer, through a little enclosed courtyard into the building block behind. They spend the night and he talks about what quantity she'd wish to stay instead of move on to her next destination, Dusseldorf. Within the morning he leaves for work, teaching at a neighborhood school. One student, Franca, details a book the category was asked to read. Claire gets dressed, packs up each day pack and goes to go away, discovering she is locked into the apartment. She cannot find a spare key and also finds the windows don't open. Believing this an accident, she hangs within the apartment, making herself some food and waits for Andy to return. He arrives home where Claire explains she couldn't leave and he realizes he forgot to go away a key for her, which he finds in his pocket. She jokingly suggests, "Did you lock me in?" And he playfully replies, "Yes, sure. But next time I'll tie you to the bed," and that they have meat injection game within the shower. They move out clubbing and he or she stays a second night. Within the morning when he leaves for work, he points out the key he's left for her on the dresser. She casually pokes round the apartment while cooking herself breakfast and finds the book of artworks from the bookshop. She opens it to her favorite page and finds a photograph of her asleep with the word, "mine," written on her shoulder, resting within the pages. She searches the apartment and begins to panic, discovering the key won't open the door, her itinerant has no service. The opposite internal door is additionally locked, and none of the available windows open. Feeling in peril now, she tries to interrupt the window with a chair and finds a second, reinforced panel behind. When Andy returns, she's waiting at the door and asks to go away, but he won't let her past. He locks the door and confronts her about the broken window, telling her casually if she tries to break the window he will must board them up. Now understanding the burden of matters, she pleads for him to let her go, but he dismisses her concerns and hands her flowers and asks if she likes pasta. Frustrated at his insanity, she bursts violently into a rage, trying to kick and punch him, but he subdues her and ties her to the bed, explaining that nobody can hear her screams, the buildings are abandoned. The camera pans bent on reveal her screams don't seem to be heard from the road. The subsequent day Andy visits his father, who asks why he was late. Andy says he met someone and tells him about Claire. His father asks about Natalie, the girl he has been seeing, and Andy tells him she returned to Canada. Andy returns to the apartment where he has continued to tie Claire to the bed on a plastic sheet. She is untied for a shower as she has urinated on herself, and finds clumps of long blonde hair within the drain, realizing there has been someone here before her. He brings her home a puzzle and enthusiastically tells her he told his father about her and has texted her mum that she is okay. Claire threatens that her mum will realize the reality. He continued to ignore her. The subsequent day Andy leaves for work, leaving Claire untied and liberated to roam the apartment as she cannot escape. We see him lock the keys in a lockbox and leave it on a shelf within the building corridor. Claire searches the apartment, finding a screwdriver under the couch. At work, Andy is annoyed at a lecturer who uses his cup from the communal kitchen. Uncomfortable, the girl empties it and washes it out. He returns home to search out Claire doing the puzzle. He helps her and he or she takes the chance to stab the screwdriver through his hand resting on the tabletop, pinning him to the table. She grabs the keys and escapes down the stairwell and across the courtyard, But a clunky door jams and Andy catches her and crushes her hand within the door as she escapes through the front building, breaking her finger. He carries a passed-out Claire back to the apartment. The subsequent day he meets his father. When he returns home, Claire tries to return calmness to the hostile situation. She continues to plead to him and tells him she misses her mum, but Andy tells her, there is not any point missing something you will not come back to, which she has him instead. Andy constantly takes photos of Claire in odd and disturbed poses, usually naked. The following day, Andy watches the feminine student, Franca, in gym class, aroused. Meanwhile, Claire attempts to select the door locks with a paperclip, snapping one off within the internal door, and worries Andy will discover her attempt. We see that Andy has locked all the sharp tools within the lockbox with the key. He continues to taunt and intimidate Claire both mentally and emotionally, moving between affection, possessiveness, and cruelty. Andy is washing Claire within the shower when Franca knocks at the door. Andy threatens Claire that if she says anything, he will kill the girl. Andy answers the door and Franca flirts with him, stating she followed him home. Seeing Claire standing in a very towel within the hallway, Andy tells her she's his girlfriend and is cruel to her, so she leaves. Back inside the apartment, Claire inquires about the girl, asking her name, and Andy cuts her hair, again photographing her. Later he discovers the inner door won't open and gets cross with Claire. We see time pass. It's now Christmas. Claire resides in terror, but as Andy continues to flirt with her, she begins to unravel and act out. Andy at one point asking her to be normal, and gets violent in his frustration at her behavior, leaving to remain together with his father. The facility within the apartment goes out and Claire is stuck for days without power. It's freezing cold and she or he eats the small food she finds. Andy's father dies and upset, he waits some days to call the caretaker, remaining in his father's house. Claire finds another girl's toenail trimming under the bed. Claire is relieved when Andy returns to the apartment some days later. Andy was unaware of the facility outage and tells him she thought he wasn't coming back. She comforts him about his father's passing and they still have another meat injection game. Claire begins warming to matters, cleaning, cooking, making an endeavor together with her appearance, playing music. Andy gives her a book and his father's dog for Christmas. Claire asks the main points of why he chose her and he explains he saw her in the road staring at the lady airing the sheet out the window, unveiling that he had planned their meeting within the bookshop. Claire asks about the previous girl, and that we see a sudden shift in his affection for Claire, annoyed at her questions. Sometime later, he takes her from the apartment into an isolated forest. He's carrying an axe. While Claire appreciates being outside, finally he lifts his axe behind her. But a young boy shouts and runs over, interrupting, asking to assist his brother who has hurt his leg. Surprised at their presence, Andy is distracted and Claire seizes a chance to try and alert the opposite boy, but he doesn't understand English and is frightened by her urgency. Andy notices and is angry at Claire. When the mother collects her children, Andy leads Claire back to the car and forces her into the boot, returning to the apartment. Andy, now annoyed at Claire's presence and jealous of her relationship with the dog, takes the dog for a walk and doesn't return with it, stating it ran away. Claire is alone again and heartbroken. While Andy attends a brand New Year's Eve party, Claire breaks into the locked room, finding his camera, a massage chair, and a photograph album of Claire in captivity. Claire also finds an album of another girl, blonde, bound and abused within the same way. Andy attempts to lure another young female tourist, sparking conversation and using the identical miswording he used with Claire, confusing contemplate life with compensate life, but the girl leaves together with her friend. Back within the kitchen, Claire notices a torchlight shining from another apartment across the courtyard and alerts the person to her distress, screaming and smashing the repaired window pane. A person reaches the apartment door, nearly freeing Claire, but Andy returns and kills him with a hammer. Andy taunts Claire that it's her fault the person is dead and forces her to assist bring to a close the body, which he burns within the coal pit in courtyard outside. The subsequent day, Andy cleans the blood and boards up the windows, punishing Claire. He notices a missing persons ad within the local paper, with Claire's picture, and flustered asks Claire to pack her bags because he's fumigating the apartment. Claire notices student workbooks on the table that Andy is grading. She purposefully burns her hand, and while Andy grabs some cream from the bathroom, she stashes away Franca's workbook. The subsequent morning, Andy tips out all the drinks and takes his and Claire's bags, leaving Claire behind within the apartment. Downstairs, he stashes Claire's bag in the basement and turns off the pipes, leaving Claire without water. At college, he hands out the workbooks and Franca finds a photograph of Claire bound and gagged slipped between the pages. Without drawing attention to her discovery, Franca excuses herself from the classroom and flees promptly on her bike. The photo is found on the ground by the opposite students and panicked. Andy rushes back to the apartment, getting stuck in traffic. Andy finds Franca's bike outside the front building and sees where she has tamed through a basement window. He finds the hammer and the lockbox open within the courtyard, and a window within the building block open. The apartment door is open and Claire is gone. He follows muddy footsteps up the stairwell and that we see him follow them past Claire hiding in a very stairwell cupboard. Even as he reaches the space where Franca is hiding, Claire calls from downstairs, luring him back into the apartment. Once he's distracted inside, Claire manages to slide out and lock the apartment door with Andy now trapped inside. A wave of euphoric relief washes over Claire as she realizes she is finally free from the apartment and Andy. Andy now pleading for Claire to free him from the apartment, she screams in victory, chucking the keys against the skin of the door, taunting Andy. She collects Franca and has found a bag together with her passport and her mother's ring. The ultimate shots are of Andy relaxing in his massage chair and Claire riding in a very car through Berlin, passing tourists sightseeing, enjoying her freedom. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below. Thank you for watching.